Hello, everyone. Welcome in Monday. Happy St. Patrick's Day. This is a green hoodie before we start the show, and Megan lies to you and tells you that it's not. Did want to tell you guys about our good friends over at Trusted American Mortgage. Trusted American Mortgage has been helping folks save money. Go to trustedamerican.com right now. They want to help you lower your interest rate, get a better monthly payment. Go to trustedamerican.com right now to see how much money they can help you save today. Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Gorilla Sports Off Ice Monday edition. Jesse Montano here, and I am joined by Meghan Angley. We've got a good show for you guys today. I'm going to be honest. We don't have a hard rundown to go on today. Megan, you and I were in the locker room today at Avs practice, and you're saying we haven't just sat down and talked hockey in a while. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to open up the floor a little bit today, just kind of chat about what's going on. There's been so much happening over the last couple of months that I feel like we've been constantly having to shift our focus from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. So today we're going to just take a little bit of a step back, broad strokes, talk about where this team is at as we approach game 70. Not a lot of time left in this season. Upcoming 3-game road trip. The Avs are on a 9-game point streak. Haven't lost at home since Mikko Rantanen was on the team. There's a lot to get into. And yes, of course, we are going to talk about Gabe Landeskog and what we saw on the ice today. But Megan, first and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's black. It's so clearly black,
gosh.
you guys. That is not green.
I can't believe she'd just come on the show and lie straight to everyone's face. It's nuts. This is dark forest green.
I will be honest. I can see that it's a little different from black, but it's still not screaming green at me.
It definitely does not. So when it was first shipped to me, I said, oh man, they sent me the black hoodie, which, hey, I love a nice black hoodie that can go with anything. But then I opened it up and I held it in the light a little bit. It looks more green probably in this light than it did in the locker room.
It certainly does.
That Mark knows this. The locker room in there is dark.
It is pretty dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good.
So yeah, probably looks a little bit more green here.
But I'm good.
Good. You were on the shelf on Friday, not feeling great. You and Mackenzie Blackwood both just not feeling super great, but you feeling better today?
I'm feeling a lot better. Well,
better.
It's the Mucinex. I'm just kidding, you guys. Geez. I'm off the Mucinex, but I am feeling a lot better. I was feeling a little bit better Friday too, so I'd kind of rounded the corner at that point. It felt more out of precaution than anything. So I covered the Dallas game on Sunday.
Yep.
Feeling good about that too. Obviously an exciting homecoming for Mikko Rantanen, first game back against the Avs. So a lot of storylines from that. On a personal note, though, feeling a lot better and excited. It's a shame the team's just jetting off on the road again.
Right.
But I was hoping a few more practices because I still feel like I have not really interviewed Jimmy Vesey, for example.
Yeah.
So I still feel like I need to get to know some of these new players.
Well, and I don't know why, Megan. I don't know why it was in my brain. I thought there was one more game at home before this 3-game trip.
Same, or like they would practice tomorrow and then fly out afterwards.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I just, and maybe it's the craziness of all the Mikko stuff and suddenly he's coming back. So a lot of our attention, I don't know what it was, but in my head, there was a little bit more time at home before this trip. But hey, that's all right. I will be there. I'll be in Toronto on Wednesday. So we'll be bringing you guys coverage from the road is back. We will have, super excited, looking forward to it. So we'll have some great coverage for you guys coming from Canada. But we're not going to spend really much time at all on this show talking about Mikko Rantanen. We talked a lot about him last week. We caught up with him a few times over the weekend. But Megan, you went into that Dallas Stars room after the game and talked to not only Mikko Rantanen, but Matt Duchene as well. Dutchie had an interesting comment about how Mikko handled it maybe better than Matt Duchene did for a while. And I just wanted to get you and I haven't really debriefed because we get done with availability, then we're in Jared Bednar availability, and then we immediately go out and do our post game and all that stuff. So we haven't just really hadn't have a chance to catch up. So I just want to know from your perspective, what was the mood like in there? It sounds like Mikko shot down a little bit of a question about, the money and things like that. What was the vibe?
It was sad.
Yeah.
And I think by the end of availability, the players were watching something on TV together in the back and they seemed fine. So I don't think they took it too hard as a team. But Rantanen's availability at the start there, I think, was still processing the loss because they did kind of force a comeback that obviously led to OT. And so I think to fall short after making that push, it was probably processing the emotion of that. And then the weight of coming back to Colorado and playing against people who were your teammates and friends for 10 years. I imagine the weight of that was a little bit carried over in that post game. And so it wasn't entirely groundbreaking. You can tell how he speaks about his time here that he didn't want to leave. It's so clear to me that in that sense, things did not go according to plan, because I had asked him a question about how his teammates have helped to lift him up sort of in preparation of this day. And he answered the question talking about his former teammates on the Colorado Avalanche and the dinner that they had the night before. And so I thought it was interesting that his default when asked about teammates is people he played with on the Avs and has not yet shifted into that gear of the Dallas teammates. I think that will come. And I think that this is a player that's still a little bit shell-shocked by it all. I don't think landing in Dallas was ever the plan going into this season for Mikko Rantanen. This isn't me caping for him in some way. I think what I like about the storyline of this game this weekend is how Colorado matched up against Dallas, a team that we know has been formidable, was obviously a thorn in their side in these last playoffs a year ago. So I think being able to see a little bit of a playoff teaser and the fact that the Avs had an answer for this team and were dominant and controlled play throughout most of it. The Mikko Rantanen of it all, I'll have sympathy. The tribute, he looked a little glassy-eyed in my opinion.
Yep, I'm with you.
And so it's touching, but I'm looking at the playoff implications and what a matchup between these teams might look like, and I'm getting excited about it. The Mikko of it all will always be a little bit weird, but it happened. And I think that everybody's just trying to find a way to move on and adjust to the new normal of not having him on the Avs and him being in Dallas.
Like you said, I don't think this was ever his plan. I was happy that Ball Arena met him with a pretty loud ovation, and not as many boos. There were some scattered in for sure. But yeah, like you said, I still think that he's just in a little bit of shock. To right now, to this moment. And it was one of the things that, had I been able to go in there with you into the Stars room and talk to him, that, hopefully we'll get this chance maybe, in a month, but you ask him, like, we've asked a lot about hockey and the contracts and what has this been like emotionally for Mikko Rantanen to go from, being pulled away from your friends, your teammates, the only organization you've ever known in the NHL, to being on the East Coast and trying to acclimate to a new group. And then, there's all this stuff that's continuing to go on behind the scenes about, is he staying? Is he not? Is he going to sign an extension? Your name is it's all over Twitter and it's all over, the news channels, especially in Canada, and everyone's talking about it. To then getting somewhere where he knows, all right, well, now I'm going to be here, but holy shit, now I got to go back to Colorado in a week. I can't imagine what that was like for him, the ups and downs and the emotional roller coaster of all that.
Yeah, that's what my question around his teammates was too, is hopefully you're getting a lot of support from people who are going to become your new friends on your new team. And it was hard to get a question in that post-game scrum, to be honest with you. So you might have had a little more luck than I did. But one of the lines of questioning was about the contract stuff. And they were met with a prickly response. Mikko Rantanen just pointed to the availability that he had done on Saturday and said, I answered everything there. So I think even Mikko Rantanen wants to be done with the Mikko Rantanen conversation.
Well, we can move on from there. It does feel, I don't know why this always sticks out to me. In 2001, after the Avs had acquired Rob Blake, and then played against the LA Kings in the playoffs. I remember Rob Blake talking about that series, and just doing that kind of helped him, turn the page. My guess is this game on Sunday was kind of the same for not only the Avs, but for Mikko Rantanen, of like, all right, now everyone can kind of move past. We know where he's going to be. We know what the circumstance is going to be. We know we're going to be playing him a lot. And I think it was good for Mikko to be able to sign off in Colorado.
I think so too. The Matt Duchene interview, I think some things that were interesting. Obviously, his discussion about how Mikko Rantanen handled it differently. I think their circumstances were very different. Their exits, departures were very different tones. I found interesting too his answer about how this Avs team that they played this past weekend is different post-deadline from the Avs team they've seen earlier in this season. You know, they had a big win over the Avs back in November, 5-3. But then there was a January game where the Avs did win against a very injured Dallas Stars team, 6-3. So now this feels like a little bit more of what each team is made of. Obviously, without the services of a Heiskanen, that's a very different story. But I think that everyone, including Kel McCarr in the Avs postgame across the way, is talking about what this matchup looks like in the playoffs, because everybody's anticipating that's going to be a problem for either side. And Duchene's takeaway was just how much stronger down the middle that this Avs team has gotten. And it makes for a pretty formidable opponent then in the playoffs as a result of what the Avs have done.
The Avs are just so much more well-rounded now than they were, making even a month ago. I think this team, and let's shift focus and talk a little bit about that. I think this team is just in such a better spot to compete. Even last year, before the Val Nichushkin stuff, take that out of it. I thought they had a really good team last year. I thought that was a team that had some depth. Obviously, you had the pieces at the top. After the first game of the playoffs, Alexander Georgiev rebounded really well. Like, I thought it was a good team. I thought it was a better team maybe than some folks gave it credit for. But it really felt like that was a group last year that you were looking at saying, man, a lot's going to have to go right. And that's always true. If you want to win a Stanley Cup, a lot has to go right. But it felt like they needed a lot of outside help, and, maybe a player injured. And, this team feels lines 1-4, pairs 1-3, both goalies. It just feels like this is a group that, assuming health, nobody scares you to the point where it's like, oh, I don't know how they match up there. And I think that game on yesterday really kind of drove that home for me.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting part of how this team came together, is it is so different from what the front office probably could have imagined in the offseason gearing up for this year. So I have to appreciate them identifying what was wrong and making moves to fix it, even though it has meant a lot of new faces in that room. I think that is a recipe that could spell disaster for other teams trying to bring so many new players into the fold. But I think it also is a reflection of how strong the core of this Avs team is. And part of the core that remains intact is such a strength of this team too, that was present in last year's playoffs, that I think carried a lot of weight. And I think similarly, some of the depth from last year's playoffs that is still present on this team today didn't get a lot of credit, in seeing playoff Kiviranta, what he could be on a third line with a Wood and Colton. It was enough for the Winnipeg Jets, at least, right? And I think that the depth is even better than they were at that point. And so I think you're right. It was a good launching off point. I think there was a good foundation in Colorado's core with the leaders that are still on this team, in Makar, in McKinnon. EJ coming back into the fold kind of replenishes some of what was lost in Rantanen. It's not same for same, and obviously their on-ice contributions are different. But I think that's part of the recipe, and why, even with so many new players, it will work.
Well, and not only the you talked about these being guys who it might be an issue on another team. Jared Bednar has put a lot of emphasis on veteran guys being able to come in, fill in right away, and not be overwhelmed by the moment. This one right here. The two guys we got in place of Rantanen bring way more energy for the team. look, you and I have talked about it. You're not going to catch us slandering Mikko Rantanen, saying he's not a good player or anything like that. But this, and then the comment that was on the screen before about the depth that the Avs have down the middle. I think that you just, it's hard to look at the way that they've constructed this roster since the Mikko Rantanen trade and what they were able to make use of, and not say all of the points of weakness that we talked about coming into the season of, all right, well, how are the Avs going to address this? How are they going to make this better? How are you going to feel better about this? They kind of did it all. They plugged the different holes in terms of roster. Now it's on the players to go out and play. But it's just so much more of a complete team. And oh, dang it, you made a comment there that I wanted to circle back to, and I can't remember.
Is it about EJ and the vibes?
Nope, it was right before that. I love this
comment. Anthony, EJ brought up the vibes per 6.
Yeah, he sure did. It was right. It was right before you said that about.
Is it about the core?
Well, yeah. Maybe it was just the fact that the core had kind of been peeled apart a little bit, especially no Gabe Landeskog. Now you lose Mikko. And you brought in a bunch of guys who are going to insulate that and, not be problematic. You and I talked about, that, there were some of those rumors out there swirling. First, Elliot Friedman said, hey, I think that's a good fit, Trevor Zegras with the Avs. And then there was some murmuring that it sounds like maybe the Avs had at least checked in on that. And you and I had both said, like, look, from a pure on-ice production standpoint, could that be something that works? Yeah. Absolutely, that could be something that works. Trevor Zegras, obviously incredibly skilled, has had multiple seasons in the NHL where he really pops production-wise. But, man, I just don't know about how that would fit personality-wise. You'd be asking him to kind of bridge a large gap here and da-da-da-da-da. The Avs said we're not doing any of that. We're going and getting mature players who have been in the playoffs, who have been leaders on their teams before, and are going to be able to come in and handle the prickliness that can be Nathan MacKinnon at times and the intensity that can come with being in that locker room and playing on this team. And I think you're seeing the results bear itself out and why they maybe prioritized doing it that way versus last year where they went and brought in Casey Middlestat. And despite that going really well for X amount of time, there was a transition period there for him. And there was a stretch where, Casey Middlestat did have to kind of bridge his game to fit. And the Avs said, we're not doing that this year. We're getting guys who can come in. You and I talked to Brock Nelson and Ryan Lindgren today, and both of them said, yep, took me about a week, but I'm feeling good, feeling comfortable, feeling caught up. And that all feels very intentional.
Yeah, their fit has been pretty seamless. And now Nathan MacKinnon and Jared Bednar have discussed specifically the value of older players. And it's not their age that is why they have value. It's the experience. A player like Charlie Coyle, who's been in the playoffs every year that he has played a season in the NHL. And I think that's a significant stat because there is something about the intensity of playoffs. It was great that Casey Middlestat was able to perform in the playoffs as immediately as he did. But I think the variance then in seeing that slip into the regular season the next year was too much of a variable that they couldn't afford to take that gamble with a young player that I think still has upside, has already found some success in Boston. And they just shored up with something that was a little bit more of a sure thing. And I think we see the results of all of these players and their fit pretty immediately. Like with Netchess in Colorado, the power play that has been a little up and down throughout the year. Like when they started the year, it was good, but the rest of the team was kind of bad because they weren't getting great goaltending. Then when they got great goaltending and things were coming together a little bit more, the power play struggled. And following the trade, it is now a top 3 power play in the league. And it has just been, I know they made the switch with Nelson on that top unit a little bit there. I just think that points to the options that they have. But I almost feel like adding a little bit of newness is what the team needed. It's not even just like, okay, we need a little bit more depth or we need to move on from Mikko Rantanen because we're not going to agree on an extension. But it's also, this might address other problems. And I think that the stagnancy that had crept into that power play a little bit is resolved just with the difference of a new player. It's not that Mikko Rantanen was bringing it down. It was just all a little bit too much of the same thing, and they needed some fresh blood on the power play. I think we see the results then in what they're able to do in being able to rotate. And I think it took some time for Nate and Netchis to figure that out together, but it happened pretty quickly. And similarly with like Brock Nelson on that second line, I think that there are going to be some growing pains, but it's not going to be so harsh. It's not going to be such a jarring shock left and right, maybe the way that Casey Middlestad's highs and lows felt.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy that Casey Middlestat, like you said, is finding a little bit of success early in Boston. I think he's a good player. I think he's a player that could have ended up fitting in Colorado well if there was more runway, less urgency to win. But again, I think they, for this group, for where it's at, for what the goal is, I think they made a lot of really intelligent moves that are kind of working themselves out a bit here. And I also think that there's a level of this that they looked at the Dallas series last year and said, that's who we got to go through. We've got to put together a team that we feel very confident can stay with a Dallas team for 7 games. You know, there's been 2 series in the last 5 years between these two teams, and it's felt the games between Colorado and Dallas are always weird, always. Going back to the early 2000s, games, let alone playoff series, are just weird between these two teams. And I thought we saw that again yesterday, but it felt to me like in the same way that when the Avs lost to Vegas in 2021, that was a loss that really stung and stayed with them. And, you know, they felt that they had to build a team that could go through Vegas. This feels a little bit like what they did at this deadline. Hey, if we're going through Dallas, we need a team that can defend, that can play heavy, that's long, that's mean. And I think that's a little bit of what they did. And let's get into it. If the Avs are able to get a little bit meaner and a little bit harder to play against somehow, it would be by adding Gabe Landeskog to the bottom half of that lineup. We were at practice today, and Megan, I don't want to get carried away here. This has been such a roller coaster of a process. Gabe Landeskog was I'm going to stop shy of saying full participant in practice. He stayed for the entirety of the practice, took part in most of the drills, most all of them, took at least 1 rep for everything they're doing, including some 5-on-5 work. Like I said, I don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but it's starting to feel encouraging. And that's maybe the most tame way that I can put it.
I think what's interesting is it's not so different from the cautious optimism we've been hearing behind the scenes for a little bit now. And, you know, there were even points around December, January timeframe where there was concern around skating back to back because of inflammation.
Yep.
And Jared Bednar denied those reports. I don't doubt that they came from a place of truth too. And it's just been a matter of what timeline, you know, like at what point in his rehabilitation and return to play plan was that happening? But the results were there too in what was media facing. This was a player that was only joining the team for morning skate some of the time. We had yet to see him out of practice, let alone stay at a practice. Like sometimes he'd be at practice and he'd get on the ice a little by himself before or after. But to see him stay for the entirety of the practice was different. It is a development. And all of the noise that's around the Landeskog story right now, the media circuit that he's going on and talking about what this process has been like, pulling the veil back on it a little bit, I do think it's very intentional. And someone asked in the chat if he's taking contact. No. So Gabriel Landeskog's not making his return to play this Wednesday on the road trip, but he will be skating with the team. And the thing to be keeping an eye on is if he is skating more consistently, and back-to-back practices kind of a thing, because this is a team that loves days off at this point too, or optional skates. So it also wouldn't be so weird if,
Right.
again, to the media-facing public eye, we don't necessarily see it, but the fact that we're seeing it is because they let us see it.
Right. Well, and I'm going to take it a step further. We saw Gabe Landeskog changing out in the locker room today. We haven't seen that if you count the COVID years where we weren't allowed in the locker room, it's been since 2020 since we've been able to see Gabe Landeskog in the locker room at the same time as his teammates changing out. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but to your point of just like, there's new developments. For a long time, Gabe Landeskog would, he'd be out there, but he would get off the ice early and he was long gone by the time we got in there. To me, this was the first time that we have been able to see him participate in this way. And again, like, he's still technically no contact, despite not wearing the no contact jersey. But we haven't seen him skate this hard for this long with the team. And stay out on the ice well after. I'm going to run the video here of just what we saw of him today at practice. Look, Megan, we've done this so many times of how does he look? What is he? How's he skating? How's he this? How's he that? So, it's hard to say, does he look like he could play in a game or not? But this, for my money, was the best that he's looked so far. And I feel like this is the third time consecutively that we've been able to say this is the best he's looked so far.
Right. It's all building blocks. FU 2006, a full participant in practice is a great sign, and I assume he's going to be practicing a lot more, but we need to see him have a full contact practice. That's true, but you have to start without the full contact practice first, right? It's building blocks, and it's got to lead to that. And so this was an important step in the right direction to kind of quash maybe the stagnancy concerns around his development, because he hadn't been on the ice with the team for a practice yet. Chris McFarland addressed that fact that, at the time we'd been creeping into February, March, and he'd still yet to take a practice.
Right.
And similarly, on the other side of it is the availability that Chris McFarland did after Lindgren was acquired. And it felt way more neutral. Did we assign negative value to Chris McFarland's comments about Landeskog's status is the question. And
I've been wondering that. Hey, was he more of hinting at like, oh, I'm sure you guys can tell this is heading towards him trying to come back in the playoffs. Right. And we all assumed it was like, oh, and that's part of the reason why I don't want to get overly carried away. Because there have been, there's been setbacks. There's been, changes in how he's progressing, how quickly he's progressing, all of that stuff. So like, I don't want to get carried away, but this today felt like maybe one of the more significant steps. And I know there's at least one person who's putting it in their articles today. So I'll go ahead and tell the story here. Gabe Landeskog, again, we were all in the locker room, and it was the first time that Gabe had been back in the locker room. And he was being funny, very obviously tongue-in-cheek, was giving us media folk a hard time. Him in the train, because like you said, he's going on this trip, this 3-game trip with the team. So he's getting all of his stuff packed again. And you could tell he was even a little bit excited, being able to tell the equipment guys like, hey, make sure you bring this, make sure you bring this. And loudly, as he was walking out of the room to mess with us, it was a joke. He goes, yeah, make sure that I'm going to need it for the game Wednesday that I'm playing in. Did everyone get that? And then he walked out, and it was a joke, and we all laughed. And it was just fun to have him in there making jokes and being in a place where he felt like he could make light of, the situation a little bit and tease us a bit of, hey, yep, playing Wednesday.
He walked around the corner, then he put his hands on the door frame, poked back in and said, did you guys get that?
Yeah.
So he's very clearly messing with us.
Right.
It's wholesome.
It's right. And again, I just, I don't know if he would have been in a place to joke like that 6 months ago, where it's like, I don't know. but it's just good to see him around, good to see him laughing, joking, and kind of back to, today he felt like one of the guys, back part of the team and on the ice with them and in the locker room with them and all that stuff. And, we've heard through this media tour that he's on that's maybe one of the biggest things that he's missed is being able to be part of the team.
Something he's talked about too is the challenge of having new faces in the locker room, being the captain and trying to get to know them is hard to do when you're kind of out of the everyday mix of things playing in games with them. So no matter what, it's important for him as the captain to be around this team as much as possible, gearing up for the playoffs to get to know some of these new faces. And, Jared Bednar has described him as an extension of the coaching staff. And so his opinion and his view of the team is extremely important. Yeah. So that's another important thing. But I love talking about the moment, seeing him back in the practice facility, in that locker room. I had to whiplash, look at you for a second. You're right. We haven't seen him there in years. And it was really special to see it again.
Yeah.
He waves came on in my car again, you guys. I'm not even kidding. As I was pulling into Valley Sports, I was like, oh man, I think I'm going to get a little too excited about all of this.
And this is giving us way too much credit, but I would have to imagine there was even an element of that for Gabe Landeskog. Like, damn, I'm in the locker room and the media's in here.
This guy's wearing a black sweatshirt
on St. Patrick's Day. But again, just like that sense of normalcy where, again, he's not been in the room when we've been there. And,
yes.
He's been away for it. So again, I'm sure just like that little bit of like, ooh, I'm in here with the guys. I'm in here when the guys are in here. The media's in here. It's a full locker room. Yeah. Now leave. I'm sure that was probably what it was, but I'd like to think that maybe seeing us in there made him feel a little bit more like, the good old days.
I do hope it added to it feeling more normal for him again.
Me too. All right, here's the question, Megan. 2 questions. What do you think? Does he come back in time for playoffs? Not in time for in the playoffs?
Yes. I think from a cap standpoint, it makes sense for it to happen in the playoffs.
Yep, has to.
Obviously, though, the runway in the playoffs isn't as forgiving to like, hey, just get him in a game, see how he does.
Right.
You don't really want to play around with that either. So that's where there's a little bit of risk with it happening then. But I just don't see it happening soon enough to be inside the regular season or the cap making sense before then as well. So I think that realistically, we are looking at the return of Gabriel Landeskog in the playoffs, an attempt at one, and it will probably be very sheltered to see how he feels returning to game action. And anything past that, I think I'd be uncomfortable speculating around.
Yeah, and I think sheltered is the key there for me, Megan, because we were just upstairs talking, and I was talking with Matt, one of our Gorilla coworkers, and he goes, I just don't think you can jump right back into playoff hockey after not playing for 3 years. And I think that's a fair argument, but I do also think that we have to keep in mind it would be in a limited role, somewhere between probably 8 to 12 minutes that, those first couple games back. And then my guess would be is that the plan would be a game on, a game off, a game on, a game off, at least until we see if it can hold up. And I think the word attempt that you used is so important to keep in mind. And this is something that you and I have talked about on this show for a couple of months now. I feel fairly confident in saying, Megan, that Gabe Landeskog will skate in another NHL game. I'm not going to put a timeline on it, when it'll be, where it'll be, any of that. I feel confident that Gabe Landeskog will skate in another NHL game. What I don't know is how many games he'll play in after that. We are going to go through a Peter Forsberg-esque period of time here when he tried to make his return after several years to the Avalanche, and he had to play a handful of games to see if he could do it, and he couldn't. And so he played, I believe it was 3 games, maybe 4, before having to say, we tried and I just can't. There is going to be a period of time here with Gabe Landeskog where it is going to be the same thing. If he's able to make that return, there's going to be a portion of it where it's, okay, he's back. He's going to play 3 games here, and then let's reconvene. because not only the contact, my understanding is I don't think this, I mean, obviously if someone goes knee on knee with him, that's not going to be great, but I don't think that this is an injury that's going to be like too affected by like, getting crunched on the wall super hard. But it's when a guy's leaning on you and when you're battling in front of the net and you're having to make that instinctive stop and start again and pushing off of that leg. That's all the stuff that I think we're going to see is just what is that pain level like? Can you manage it? How much does it affect you? And so, yeah, like you said, he's going to make the attempt. And based on what we saw today, everything with the documentary, if you buy into all of that stuff and how it's being released, this kind of press junket he's on, I would say that there's a fair chance that we see Gabe Landeskog make a go of it in this year's playoffs. Might just be one game, might just be one shift, but I think he's going to give it a go. Or he's going to do everything he can to do that.
I think so too. I think that's what all of this is gearing up for. And, I don't want to put any sort of ceiling on it either. Like, if there is a world where he returns to play and just kind of ramps up to speed gradually, and maybe, that early return is a shadow of what he was before, but he's still an impactful NHL player, I'm still willing to see the sky as the limit. That's where I cap my speculation on it all is it's got to start with that building block of making the attempt first. Then we can weigh in on, all right, well, what's possible then for Landeskog in the path forward from here? But we have to get to that day first with that initial attempt to return to play happening. And we're a little bit off from it, but I think we're closer than we ever were before. And that's what's still exciting about having this conversation is we'd be doing media availability, radio hits throughout this year. Everyone on, around the league wants to know what's really going on with Gabriel Landeskog.
Yeah.
And we'd answer with cautious optimism. We're hearing good things, but there's nothing really definitive or tangible here just yet. It's starting to get a little bit tangible. And that's why it is different. That's why there can still be some optimism, but it's still pretty cautious.
Well, and the silence is starting to break a little bit. And now look, I give a shout out to my guy, Corey, Mass Sack from the Denver Post. We were all talking about it after practice today. And, he was definitely saying like, look, let's not get out ahead of our skis here. Like there is still a lot that we need to see over the next 5 weeks to feel any level of confidence, to say like Gabe's coming back hard. I think I'm feeling more and more confident in my speculation that he'll be back based on, all the factors that you were kind of just talking about. But I do think Corey is right. Shout out Corey. I do think Corey is right that while all of this is pointing in the right direction, this is a fragile process. This is still a delicate rehab that he's going through. And at any moment we can see a setback. And hey, we got to slow this down. Jared Bednar told us today, it's 2 steps forward. Sometimes it's 1 step back. You're still moving forward, but it's not as quickly as you hope. So while all of this, I agree with you. While all of this, I do think is pointing towards an attempted return. Let's keep the cautious optimism because it's far from set in stone.
Do you envision him then as a 3rd line wing, 4th line wing?
And again, so let's assume health. That the lineup that we saw last night for the forwards is the same lineup that you've got to work Gabe Landeskog back into. What I would do, and this is, and again, Chloe has run a smear campaign on me and how I feel about Yoel Kiviranta this year. Chloe
didn't do that. You did that.
Chloe did it.
With your choices, Jesse.
Chloe did it, and she's not here today to defend herself, so I can throw her under the bus.
I'll defend her. You did this. You hate Kivy.
I'd pull Kivy out.
Of course you would.
And plug Gabe in right there. And that is not an indictment on Kivy. I really like that 4th line. And so here's what I would do is I'd pull Kivy out, go Gabe there, and then I'd go every other game. Gabe, Kivy, Gabe, Kivy, Gabe, Kivy. Until you either decide Gabe can handle it, Gabe can go every night, or He can't, and you just go back to Yoel Kiviranta. That's what I would do. Assuming health, assuming you can keep all this together. I just really like Parker Kelly, Jack Drury, Logan O'Connor. And I would go on a rotation 92 and 94 every other night.
It reminds me, okay, no, this does not remind me of the cup run that specifically, but it did feel like the fourth line was intact, and it was the third line that had a little bit of rotation. I was going to say that, options.
Megan, but I was like, no, I don't know if that's a silly comparison.
Because this is super different in terms of circumstance, but the reasoning for keeping the fourth line intact, I think, is similar.
Yes,
Separate
100%.
The Landeskog of it all for a second.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's important in what the front office has built in terms of depth, in what this fourth line currently is, and the options that they have, because there's still a Miles Wood who, if it weren't for the injury, is certainly an NHL regular. I know that he's had a down season. I have not been particularly in love with the season Miles Wood has had, but that's a guy that's usually in the lineup for most NHL teams. And the fact that this fourth line that we're talking about that we love does not contain him is really interesting to me. One is why I love Jack Drury as an addition so much. I think he's a great fourth line center. I think, too, the interesting thing in this kind of rotating cast is all of them are really good penalty killers. So no matter who's in the lineup, they can help take some of those minutes off of players like Nichushkin and Lehkonen. And that might be where some of that workload is a bit heavier. If a Landeskog's night is a little bit sheltered, then it probably means that it's putting a little bit of weight on the top six in general. And so I think all of it works together, and it's by design that you have a great group of guys who can kill penalties. And I love what that fourth line has become. Someone in the chat earlier mentioned energy with Necas and Drury. And I think that it's so true just in the makeup of the bottom six presently. Ross has been energy since he's been in Colorado. That's how we know him. Mm-hmm. Charlie Coyle has a little more of an edge to him. And I think LOC has always been that. Parker Kelly has emerged as that. And then Kiviranta in that mix is just very versatile. And that's why I'd agree that he'd probably also be my guy coming out, though I love him and what he's been doing lately. It feels weird. He's got 15
goals this year.
It feels weird to say that too. Like even recently with goals in back-to-back games, this is someone who I think's benefited from the new look on that third line. Like I think he's benefiting from a Colton and a Coyle working together, and I think that he's a very complimentary player. So it's certainly not a dig at Kiviranta, but rather a celebration of where this depth has come.
Right. And Megan, I'm so glad that you brought up, and that's exactly it's exactly my reasoning for why it would be Kivy for me. Like I said, he's got 15 goals this year. For all jokes aside, for as much as we've talked about Yoel Kiviranta this year, and I've been hard on him, he's had a fantastic season. And truthfully, Megan, he's had a fantastic season building off of a fantastic playoffs last year for Yoel Kiviranta. He really took his game to a different level, I thought, in the postseason last year versus what we saw from him in the regular season. But again, for me, you're right. It's not a punishment of Yoel Kiviranta because, again, I wouldn't want to say, take Kivy out. He's the extra forward. Like, no, I'd want to work that on if Gabe plays, whatever, Gabe won game one, Kivy's game two, Gabe's game three. And then you just kind of work on that until you feel comfortable with Gabe. His knee feels, or again, here's the other reality of the Gabe Landeskog situation is that might be what you're looking at. Let's just hypothetically say that Gabe Landeskog came back and the Avs go on a run to the Stanley Cup final. There's a real world where Gabe plays half the games anyways on a load management type schedule. So you would need a guy like Yoel Kiviranta to be able to be impactful on that third line every night. And just like in 2022, your fourth line aren't your worst players. There are a certain archetype of players that fit well together. Jared Bednar, I think it was either last night or today where he even said, third line, fourth line, whatever you want to call him. I don't really look at him like that. And that's why I just think that Gabe would fit better with Charlie Coyle, Ross Colton, than he would with Jack Drury, Logan O'Connor. And hey, look, if Yoel Kiviranta's game just continues to go up and up and up, all right, well, maybe it is Parker Kelly that you pull out and you do that kind of rotation with. But I'm with you. Again, and that's the good problem it would be for the Avs. Oh, man, we got to try to figure out a place to fit in Gabe Landeskog in the bottom six. I think it's a good problem to have. And if you're having to pull out a guy who scored 15 goals and maybe more by the time the season ends and Joel Kiviranta, well, hey, guess what? Now you've got a guy to plug back in that's a 15 goal scorer, at any moment. And suddenly your depth that you can go to is Joel Kiviranta, Miles Wood, Jimmy Vesey. That is a far cry from where we were at the beginning of the season.
No, it is. It feels like downright greedy even to have those options awaiting. And what makes the interesting conversation is if anybody inside the top 6 got hurt, you don't feel great about like how this shifts upward a little bit outside of Coyle and Colton. Those are the two you're like, yeah, I think they could hang with the top 6 if they needed to. It's not really great. And this isn't me specifically calling out Val Nichushkin. It's just generally, that could be a difficult area of the lineup to replace because of how well constructed it is. So then you start to feel maybe like not as good about it. But I think just having even a Coyle and a Colton that could flex up, I don't know. It feels like a luxury that not every team gets to have, even to replenish their top 6 if it became necessary. So I think they've done more than enough to address the depth at the bottom of the lineup. And there's even some kind of contingency plans for the top of it too. And that's pretty masterful.
Yeah, you're 100% right. It's not to mention if you get Gabe in and he's feeling good, you can spot duty him in on some ozone faceoffs, power play 2, maybe in front of the net. He's going to give you some options. The other thing with Gabe Landeskog, look, I'm not expecting him. Again, hypothetically, if he comes back this playoffs, I'm not expecting him to be the same player he was 3 years ago. I'm not. But I'm also expecting some semblance of that to still be there in terms of his ability in front of the net and his hands and finding pucks, in traffic and the deflections and things like that. He was an elite player that doesn't just go away. So you'll be able to plug him in and again, just a little bit, maybe more insurance for that top 6, like you're talking about.
Yeah. And isn't it funny to think too, with even how the 2 units on the power play have come together? We talked a little bit about the options, like, okay, they put Drouin back on that top unit. Brock Nelson moves to the second unit. Gabe doesn't have to be in that mix.
Right.
It's really solid otherwise, but it's just another option. And knowing what he does so well, especially on the man advantage with his net front presence, it just makes it stronger. And you do want to see too, you want to put Gabe in situations that he'll thrive and succeed too. So I could see that being a possibility. And maybe that's sort of how the minutes get broken down at the end of the night too, is maybe it favors a little bit more man advantage and he's more sheltered 5v5.
Yep. You've mentioned Brock Nelson there a couple times. You and I caught up with Nelson today. I guess anything else on Gabe Landeskog before we move on here and start to wind things down a little bit?
No.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to keep an eye on it. Like I said, I'll be in Toronto. So if we see him on the ice, if we see him continue to ramp this up or, maybe officially go to the red no contact jersey, something like that, we'll make sure to have all your guys' updates. But encouraging stuff from Gabe. You can head on over to my page, Gorilla Sports, check out the video from today. Let's talk about Brock Nelson. The production maybe hasn't been there in the way that people were maybe expecting after he hits a post on his very first shift as an Av. But Megan, I think he's been really solid. We caught up with him today. Let's hear from Brock Nelson, then we can maybe chat a little bit about him. And then I want to get into a Josh Manson update as well, talk about that. But,
yes.
Avalanche forward Brock Nelson. Start with how you're feeling. Now you're a bit settled in here. Just how you're feeling. You're gelling with that line there. Jared Bednar's heaps some praise on that second unit there.
Yeah, I think every day. I talked a little bit with Bedsy today. Just talking about every day being a little bit more and more comfortable, especially playing with those guys, trying to figure out some tendencies and just go out there and play and support one another. And I'm sure it's a little bit of adjustment. Kind of both ways. So I think we've had a couple good games. I think the last game was a better game for us in terms of driving the offense, and know that we can do that more often than not and be a difference maker offensively while also being reliable defensively.
we talked a lot, and guys in here talked about Val Nichushkin maybe being a guy who flies under the radar a bit in the league.
Yep.
So what have been your first impressions of playing with him?
Yeah, I always knew he was a solid player. I think when you see him firsthand, I think he does everything extremely well, and like you said, probably does go a bit unnoticed for people that don't tune in and watch every Avs game. So playing with him has been great. I think in the first week here, he's just an easy guy. Works extremely hard, and like I said, he does everything extremely well. Little things, big body, moves well, forechecks extremely well, creates offense, great shot. Kind of got the whole package that somebody that probably deserves more recognition for what he does out there.
In terms of learning certain tendencies of your line mates too, it seems like some of it comes a bit naturally to you guys. Is there anything that both Duran and Josh can do well that complements you?
Yeah, I think it's them. I think thinking the game at a high level, doing a lot of the things, extremely well, while also being able to just kind of read the plays within kind of the structure, and then also the freedom to kind of just make, create an ad-lib offense and support one another to just try and 2-on-1s, find different spots. Every game's a little bit different. The support's going to be a little bit different, but I think both those guys think the game extremely well. So trying to keep it as simple as we can and just build and get better each and every game, more communication. Just trying to figure out, different spots, and when you go through situations, just kind of talk through, what guys are thinking.
This is a team that has always been in the face-off circle. Can you tell me about your strength in cutting draws and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think face-offs are a big part of the game. Always try to work on it. Most days you take a few at the end of practice to try to work on it. I think Charlie's another guy that's extremely strong on draws, and Jack. So all four of our guys up the middle now, I think, are solid on face-offs. That that can end up being a difference in terms of some more offense and more ozone.
Has any of the dust settled in terms of family integrated and over here?
A little bit. That'll probably be a work in progress for us, just with kids being in school back in New York. So we had our oldest come out. He checked it out last week. He loved it. Had a great time at the game. Had a blast. He said he loved Denver. So I think we'll get them all out here next week for an extended period of time, so they can kind of check it out. They'll go back, maybe finish up some school, and come back out here for the rest of the season and playoffs.
Do you have any thoughts or any conversations about maybe a contract extension here? Do you have those meetings with
thought about it, but I mean, right now, just trying to worry about playing and helping the team here, and all that will sort itself out. And just trying to worry about my game and raising it, integrating into the team, and everything beyond that will kind of sort itself out based off that.
All right, there we go. Brock Nelson got in that question there at the end. Chris McFarland did say that they would chat and see if it's a fit, and if both sides are happy with Brock Nelson here, that maybe he might be the 2C option for the next couple seasons. Megan, what have you thought of Brock Nelson?
I love him.
Yeah.
I think too, in measuring what he brings to this team, it's got to be outside of just production. I think that's going to come in a more pop kind of way. Just in what has been teased so far, I think that he has instant chemistry with Val Nichushkin. And I think sneakily, quietly, Jonathan Drouin's been playing well all year. I know he's missed some time, but basically every time that he does play, there's some kind of significance to it. And so to that end, I think putting him back on the power play, it produces returns because he's such a great passer. And I think that's where learning tendencies is going to be really huge for Brock Nelson as the new player on that line. I think we're going to see that all come together in a really compatible way down the stretch here. And as far as what Brock Nelson brings, I do think being the big, long player, you could see too, just even in between whistles, this is a player that's not going to get pushed around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'll stop short of describing him as this extremely physical player, but there is a little bit more grit to his game than I even expected to see. And that's where you talked about this team on the whole becoming just a little bit meaner. I think Brock Nelson adds to it. And similarly, what he adds down the middle in terms of winning draws and just helping, it matters when it matters. And so it matters late in games in a D-zone start. And it's going to matter. I don't know that he's necessarily thrown on the kill. That's where Charlie Coyle has excelled. But the overall big picture of what both those players has brought, I think, can be measured past the production. And I think it's just a matter of time for that to come for Brock Nelson. I think the difference too, I don't like to draw the direct comparison to Casey Middlestat. I don't think that's fair, but it is so much clearer to me where the experience shines for Brock Nelson. I just feel like there's a lot less hesitancy in his game.
He's a mature player.
He's a very mature player, and I think that also improves the bottom line for a puck possession team. I think sometimes if the puck was on Middlestad's stick for a second too long, he could be prone to a turnover because players would capitalize off of that. And I just don't think that Brock Nelson allows that kind of room for mistakes in his game in this way. That I also want to appreciate its experience. And I think that's another thing that maybe is hard to measure on a score sheet, but I see immediately with Brock Nelson.
Well, and he mentions that he thinks faceoffs are important, and we've heard guys talk about that before. Who was it a couple seasons ago? It's a strong faceoff guy for the Avs. Or maybe I was just talking to Cogs about faceoffs because the Avs are struggling, and he was saying something like, yeah, you want the puck. If you win the faceoff, you have the puck. You want the puck more. And, we've had guys here in town before playing for the Avs that have not put a lot of emphasis on faceoffs and saying, you got to win certain faceoffs, but in general, whatever. I like the fact that Brock Nelson called out, like, yeah, it's important. I work on him as much as I can. And it's just a different element that the Avs have needed. He wins a big faceoff last night in overtime and then stays on the ice. He originally looked like he was maybe going for a change, and they kind of waved him off, like, no, stay on the ice. And he ends up, picking up an assist on the game-winning goal. So I think Brock Nelson brings something that the Avs have needed. He's different than what they've had. And for me, I do like the way that he is fitting in away from the puck. I think he's doing a lot of great things defensively. He gets the screen last night on Val Nichushkin's goal. And I think he can be someone that you can look at and say, well, nice. The offense will come. Brock Nelson is going to score goals. And when you start to get that, in addition to what I think he's brought in the early days here of this trade, I think you're happy with it.
Certainly. He's a huge competitor. I think all of the new guys are.
I agree. And that's part of the reason why they're fitting well. Josh Manson, being evaluated still. It is a new upper body injury, not related to the hand injury that he dealt with earlier in the season. He's going on the trip. Jared Bednar said that they're expecting to have more information by morning skate of the Toronto game. But he said, look, he's not day to day. Suddenly, Eric Johnson's presence is a lot more important. Josh Manson, I feel for him. This has been a tough year injury-wise.
It has. It's been the one area of the deadline, like immediately when the trades were closed, that we worried. Did they address this enough? The possible absence of Josh Manson in this lineup is a huge concern because he plays such a huge role on this team.
Yeah.
And the addition of Lindgren, obviously, I think was intended to help make up for that a little bit. A player who, as a top pair guy in New York, was being overused in terms of role, can eat big minutes, so maybe help alleviate some of that burden from Josh Manson. But I don't think the plan was to lose Josh Manson in the mix. Right. So it's just been really tough because what we're hearing is he's been evaluated. He's getting reevaluated kind of for second opinions in terms of what the path to recovery looks like, what all the options are. I'm not going to immediately assign negative value to that, but I think they want to be cautious, especially this time of year. Like, what does the return to play look like? Is it realistic for him to even return in the rest of the regular season? Do we need to just hold him off until playoffs?
Yeah.
I don't know what room we're in that sense, but he's such an important part of that back end. I think, though, Lindgren and Johnson and the ascension of Sam Malinsky again, who has had kind of an up and down year, I think that he's come out of the Four Nations break playing better, and he's such a different player from Manson. So I think it's not that, Malinsky playing better helps make up for Josh Manson possibly being out, but it's everyone. It's Malinsky helps to make up for a little bit of that. Eric Johnson helps to make up for a little bit of that. And Ryan Lindgren quietly makes up for a huge part of that because he eats big minutes, he can PK, and I think that he has enough skill upside to hang in that top four role. And that's one reason I think that will prove to be one of the bigger deadline acquisitions than maybe we've talked about.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Ryan Lindgren because I did want to make sure we mentioned that before we sign off here. Look, I don't have his numbers, his analytic data in front of me from since he arrived. I think Ryan Lindgren's been big. for the Avs. And I mean, talk about a warrior. We heard about how he puts his body on the line. That he gave a lot to the New York Rangers, and we're already seeing that here. And just, being a warrior, and he's going to be key if this Josh Manson injury is longer than maybe they want. Ryan Lindgren's going to have a significant role in helping to paper over that and give that second pairing that kind of mean, nasty punch that Josh Manson brings to it.
Yeah, because that's the part that you miss a lot, because it's not represented very much elsewhere in that decor. And so the physicality and the sandpaper in Lindgren's game helps to make up for some of that that's missing in Manson's, because it's not Malinsky who's bringing that. Though
No.
I know that is sort of kind of on the to-do list for him to grow as a player, is to get a little bit meaner. I think that's going to take a little bit of time for him to learn how to do that effectively as more of an undersized defenseman. That's where EJ just being a bigger body also helps to take care of the net front. So again, it's not one player like helps make up for this. Lindgren's kind of at the top of that list, but everyone by committee is helping to alleviate some of the pain of losing Manson, even if it's just short term.
Yep. What else for today, Megan? I'm out. I got nothing else.
So it's a big road trip. I'm excited. I'm glad that you will be there for some pretty key moments at its start. Back to our road coverage, so people can expect to see some post-game morning skate content too, exclusives. I think that's exciting to get back in the swing of things. Yeah,
I'm anxious to be able to chat with some of these the new guys on the road and just be able to dive in a little bit more. You and I should have some collaborative post-game content coming on Thursday for the Ottawa game, so keep an eye out for that. And then, guys, we do have a really fun, exciting special announcement coming later this week. It is something that people have been asking for really since the beginning of this, and we are really excited to be able to announce we've got some I don't want to say too much, some fun updates coming for Guerrilla Sports. During that Brock Nelson interview, we were going through an email that we got, and you and I were just a little bit giddy. So I'm really looking forward to being able to share that with everyone later this week.
The way I see it is there are things that we obviously get excited about. It could be like a cool interview that we have coming up. I think that this will be something the people listening get most excited about.
Yeah.
Like, we're pretty hype about it, but I actually think you guys listening are going to love this even more than we will.
Yep. I'm like I said, I'm excited. People have been asking for it for a long time, and we're excited to be able to deliver it. And I based on the email that we got a chance to look at, Megan, I think people are
I really like it.
I'm with you. All right, that's going to do it for today. She's Meghan Angley. I'm Jesse Montano. We got Mark back in the house.
Mark returns.
We didn't know, maybe he was just going to leave us by, to our own devices and
he'd come to his senses and realize he's too talented.
Yeah. You and I were walking into a lot of buildings this week and we're going, hey, where's Mark? It's like, oh, I'm here too, I guess. But no, Mark's out having fun. Mark is back. And shout out Chloe, not feeling well.
Yeah.
I'm glad I wasn't here when she was not feeling well earlier. So now that we're from afar and she's not coughing all over me, shout out Chloe. I hope you're feeling better.
She got the Blackwood special.
She sure did. She's day to day. That's going to do it. Guerrilla Sports Off Ice. We're back at it tomorrow, right?
Yes.
Pucks and Prosecco. I got messed up last week with the schedule. We got Pucks and Prosecco coming your way this week.
Chloe's feeling better.
Ooh, if Chloe's feeling better. Chloe messing everything up. We got Pucks and Prosecco coming your way. We got another episode of Guerrilla Sports Off Ice coming your way later this week, plus tons of road coverage. Thanks for tuning in. Megan, Jesse, Mark, looking forward to talking to you guys more this week. Should be a fun one. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.